Yep. Needs to be
And
one.
we're live.
Okay, we are back here at House Education on January 31st, 2025. Last year, we passed what is now Act 168, which we mostly refer to as the BOCES bill, Boards of Cooperative Educational Services. For our new members, it was really just enabling legislation that essentially said, if y'all want to create some BOCES, go right ahead. But it really didn't provide any oomph behind it in either funding or staffing. Obviously, it's been not something that people have glommed onto right away just because everybody's busy with everything else. And of course, busier now as we hear all sorts of crazy stuff from Washington. But it's definitely good to get an update. And we have Sherry and Jill here. Who is going to speak first?
I will.
All right, Sherry, if you just introduce yourself and for the committee testimonies on the page, there's also a letter from the Superintendent's Association that's worth reading on this topic as well. All right, Sherry, the floor.
All right. Good morning, Chair Peter Conlon, Vice Chair Chris Taylor, and members of the House Committee on Education. Thank you for inviting me and my colleague to provide testimony on H630, legislation to create regional boards of cooperative education services. I am Sherry Souza, Mountain View Supervisory Union Superintendent. I'm joined by Jill Graham, Vermont Learning Collaborative VTLC Executive Director. Jill joined VTLC this August and brings almost 20 years of experience working within collaborative models in Massachusetts. In my now 40th year as an educator, I've served my students and community as a special education teacher, building-based administrator, director of special education, and over the last few years, superintendent.
VTLC has a very strong, committed board who have been pioneers in envisioning regional services for many years. This group proactively set aside funding to conduct a landscape analysis for regional services and an executive director search. As a result, VTLC relaunched as a private entity with an executive director who brought significant collaborative experience and began regional services in the summer of 2023. The barriers and obstacles that we will outline below are threatening the existence of VTLC beyond this fiscal year. Not all areas of the state have had this same interest for regional services, experience with educational service agencies, or the foresight to allocate startup funding, further jeopardizing the realization of the benefits of cooperative educational services. These agencies have existed for more than 50 years across the United States. The model exists as a result of area superintendents acknowledging that the allocation of their collective resources to create and support specialized services result in economies of scale that are cost-effective and better outcomes for students. Educational service agencies can offer an extensive array of services from transportation, professional development, staffing, specialized educational programming, shared services, and cooperative purchasing, to name only a few. In New England, other states have strong oversight and governance structures at their departments of education, whereby BOCES are extensions and partners of their state educational agencies. BOCES has a parent organization, AESA, Association of Educational Service Agencies, which provides guidance and support to educational service agencies across the country. The overarching mission of a BOCES is to be the go-to provider for member districts' unmet needs in a cost-effective manner. BOCES have the capacity to be a liaison between the state education department and their member districts. A BOCES also offers potential savings for the state. When students are placed educationally outside of their district, tuition and transportation costs often exceed the $68,000 excess spending threshold. This means that the state is responsible for any costs beyond that limit. By reducing the need to outsource programming so students can access their education closer to home, and districts and the state realize cost savings.
So when H630 came into law in June of 2024, the Vermont Agency of Education was tasked to support the implementation of cooperative educational services. In the last months, the boards of VTLC and the director completed their draft of the required articles of agreement. Once submitted to AOE, we learned that the lack of expertise and infrastructure to meet the expectations of this law. For superintendents to meet the tenets of H630, a clearly articulated process for developing the agreements, submission of the document, and approval of OCs must be put in place. Established structures exist in other states to support the implementation of OCs. Currently, the foundational system is not available in Vermont to fully realize the benefits and opportunities of cooperative educational services. The successful implementation of Vermont H630 relies on individual school boards to support a new service delivery model that offers the possibility of greater positive impacts on student outcome and savings for their budgets. There appears to be concern from school boards regarding the sharing of funds between districts for the establishment of student opportunities. Addressing the level of trust needed between districts to achieve the merits of H630 is another obstacle that must be considered. The Board of Mountain View Supervisory Union has supported this work as they have seen the benefit of creating specialized programs within the confines of their district. Students are able to access programming within their home communities, and new skills can be practiced within their public schools. Currently, in a district of over 1,000 students, we have 2 students in a residential placement and 2 students in day placements. This model of creating specialized programs at a regional level and offering meaningful professional development builds educator and district capacity. It has resulted in a containment of special education costs for MVSU.
The current structure of H630 does not allow newly forming cooperatives to access funding until the Articles of Agreement are written, submitted, and approved. Articles of Agreement, as outlined in H630 to create BOCES, require a set of skills and expertise that is beyond the capacity of superintendents and special education directors. The upfront cost to access this expertise and the quantity of time needed to organize, determine their BOCES focus, and complete the Articles of Agreement prohibit these groups from meeting the intent of the law. Funding needs to be upfront in order to complete the Articles of Agreement and to contract with those individuals who can support the development of these programs. Initially, VTLC used funds from a previous regional organization and ESSER dollars from participating districts to meet this financial obligation. In speaking with the other Vermont superintendents wishing to form a cooperative, this lack of funds prior to the writing of the Articles of Agreement is stopping them from moving forward to create such a regional structure. The range of services and programming that's currently available to form BOCES in Vermont is limited by the lack of guidance provided in the current legislation. For example, development of regional specialized programming is a challenge as agencies are not yet considered BOCES. The suggestion of consortium agreements has been raised by the AOE as an alternative to BOCES, but without further examples or detail. So knowledgeable resources are available in other states and nationally that model different financial and governance structures where these agencies are well established and flourishing. Both Massachusetts and Connecticut have educational service agency models that are strong and successful in their partnerships with their state agencies and their member districts. A successful BOCES has a committed board of directors who see their agency as their primary provider of resources to address unmet needs. This commitment creates stability in the services that a BOCES is able to offer. Currently in Vermont, access to disability-specific experts has become increasingly challenging. BOCES can bring educational and financial efficacy to regional districts and the state. Currently, superintendents are tasked with convincing their school boards of the need for regional programming and with securing membership commitment. All this at a time when budget constraints at the district levels are significant. The opt-in model at the local level creates another barrier to successful BOCES creation across the state.
Students who require specialized instruction in Vermont are suffering from a limited pool of well-trained special educators and access to appropriate programming close to their homes. For years, Vermont has not had an appointed director of special education who would identify unmet needs and offer opportunities for professional development. Without this depth of expertise and training, a greater number of students are needing out-of-district placement, either as day students or as residents. Directors of BOCES can provide the consultation and guidance needed to inform individual student program development, as well as develop specialized programs that are shared by districts that allow students to transition easily from their home schools and back. Not only does this provide stronger outcomes for our most vulnerable students, but allows individual districts to reduce special education costs. Without the commitment of school boards and financial resources to begin the formation of collaboratives, the situation has little hope of changing. Even with the level of expertise and financial resources that VTLC has, we are at a point where our collaborative may no longer exist after June 1st of 2025. Not all school boards within the Southeast region appreciate and financially support the opportunities that could be realized by our collaborative. The benefits of programs closer to home communities and access to deep professional development take time to realize. There are costs associated with employing a high qualified director and related service providers that are not covered with startup funds. If we can identify resources to support the next school year, we believe that the collaborative will be self-supporting and the membership fees will be reduced. The VTLC board continues to work with the supporting supervisory unions to create a model that can sustain us as we solidify our programming. There are few guarantees that this can be accomplished.
VTLC board members and the director have been approached by other superintendents regarding creating their own BOCES. They have two concerns. How do we fund the cost of consultation to write our articles of agreement? And how do we convince our boards of the need for this programming? While the interest is there, the ability to effectively collaborate is blocked by the lack of financial resources and the trust of boards that the sharing of resources is possible. To summarize our testimony today, the obstacles to realizing the full potential of cooperative educational services include access to funds to begin the formation of articles of agreement and associated BOCES startup costs, needed expertise in the formation of BOCES programs, support for BOCES agreements by school boards, agency of education infrastructure to meet the requirements of H630, clearly articulated processes for developing the agreements, submission of the document, and approval of BOCES. And also, there's a lack of expertise in mental health services for those regions seeking to utilize BOCES to support students with growing mental health needs. Thank you very much for providing us with this opportunity to share our experience in establishing the Vermont Learning Collaborative and the obstacles that we have recognized for VTLC to continue and for others' BOCES to form. We strongly believe that this model can address many of the challenges our districts are facing, to realize an economy of scale, and to improve the expertise required to support students with the most significant learning needs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you both very much. Probably, if anybody or if any group is farther along on the ability to create a BOCES, it's you folks. So you talk about sort of the existential threat for the continuation of your, what is now a consortium, really. None of that has to do with the BOCES bill. It has to do with just the challenges of having a consortium, I guess, without the organizational structure of a BOCES. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement. I think that Jill brought a level of expertise that we could access all the opportunities through H630. So walking through the articles of agreement with her based on her deep experience in setting up collaboratives was extremely helpful. I don't know if we could have understood what was required of H630 without her expertise. So I think we feel really good about where our articles of agreement, they are now with AOE, but there is no one there in AOE who really has the capacity to review the document, approve the document, so that we can move forward, even access those resources that was set aside. The threats to our organization really are around how do we convince boards, school boards, that this is a really successful model, and to commit to membership fees, and also developing programs that are across borders, across districts.
Just got a question. You said that you need articles of agreement approved in order to access those resources set aside. I don't remember us setting aside any resources.
So if I may, H630 does outline that there are allocation of $10,000 per each BOCES
Right, thank you.
to be able to access. You know, while those funds are certainly appreciated, they are limited to cover the startup funds and the drafting of articles of agreement, which are the governance structure for BOCES.
So, it sounds to me like your vision for a BOCES in your part of the state is really around specialized services for students. And I guess, yeah, go ahead.
So there are a number of different directions we've decided to collaborate. One is around developing programming. Another is around professional development. So there's certain levels of professional development that are not offered. For example, training on HHB, training on 504 laws and regulations, different curriculum, executive functioning. So what Jill has brought to our region is very accessible professional development that is not occurring at a very affordable scale.
One of the, as we talked about sort of what BOCES do in other states, and maybe Jill, you can comment on this, is that you don't necessarily even need to limit your services to a region, that sometimes BOCES specialize in different services, so that you guys may be the PD and the specialized services BOCES, but maybe one in a different region you can buy services from for transportation or something like that. Is that an accurate description of how it works in other states?
It can, yes. And, I think for Vermont, where we have some geographical constraints, when it comes to specialized programming for students, we do want to think regionally, because we will obviously want our students closest to their homes. However, when we think about other specialized services, for example, professional development, English language learner services, those certainly could become specialties of different regions. And it's a great way to divide and conquer. And that model does exist in other states where they do specialize in certain areas.
Have you thought about, okay, here, really itemized, here is what we need. I mean, we can't legislate trust, obviously, which you put there as one of your major roadblocks. But in terms of the things that the legislature could provide to launch you on a successful BOCES journey, including a budget, have you guys put pen to paper to that level of detail? Because honestly, I'm thinking out loud here, but I'll share my thinking out loud with everybody is, perhaps what we need is a pilot that shows how a BOCES can be successful, not only in providing services, but in reducing costs. So I guess I would be interested to know, like, in detail, what would it take for you guys to be successful?
So currently, in our status, there's a strong interest in our region for the development of specialized programs for students. So with that, we need obviously commitment from our members that here are the programs we're interested in, and here are the students who need those services. Once that is identified, which we're in the process of doing, we then need space. There is space, and obviously that's a conversation within the legislature as well around schools that have some open spaces within them around the state. We certainly have that opportunity within the Southeast region as well. And our members are currently looking at what their capacities are around hosting programs. Our BOCES.
My question was more, I think those are issues that your BOCES would have to solve, which we would sort of leave up to you. But more, what do you need to sort of create the BOCES itself to be successful for more than just a little short period?
Sure. So we need the finalization of our articles of agreement. We need the commitment of our members to be part of a BOCES. Because funding is a significant concern, our BOCES is currently proposing membership fees as a way to fund the agency for at least the initial startup. If there is access to additional funding that can support a pilot, that would significantly help to support and stabilize the agency as they launch.
Most BOCES, from my understanding, are supported and run through membership fees, aren't they?
In my experience, actually, they are not. They are fee for service. And there are, however, models around the United States in other states where membership fees are levied. It would be my hope that once the agency is stabilized and there is a consistent fee-for-service model, membership fees would not be necessary for the boards that are joined.
Anybody else on the committee with a question? Hey, you could dominate here. Representative Brady, dominate away.
I guess this is probably more for you, Sherry, and kind of knowing the whole statewide landscape right now and challenges. And obviously the legislation is not even a year since we passed it. So unrealistic to think this was going to just turn on overnight. And then thank you very much, outlined some of the real challenges. To what extent do you see, I think we're swirling with, how can we change things within structures that exist in the state versus how much should we be going down the path of sort of starting new around some of our governance and delivery structures? So in that, to what extent do you think BOCES is something, if we leaned into this really hard, there are all of these services that could be delivered or organized in a more consolidated manner and efficiencies to be gained, versus BOCES may be a powerful tool for a few things, but it maybe isn't central enough to the underlying challenges we have right now about scale and sustainability in Vermont. That's a very, very broad question, but we're trying to understand what tools already exist in the toolbox that we could use better or differently or turbocharge, versus where do we need to be in just a whole other
Well, I think I'm really thinking about containment of special education costs, right? When we're talking about the expense of providing education for students and our current funding challenges, containing special education costs is really significant. And I think our district has really done a great job of that. With 1,000 students and only 2 in residential and 2 in day placement, we are not outsourcing our costs. We can predict which students are going to be successful. How do we support them? It starts early on. And we were able to build that depth of programming because we were able to bring in external experts to really look at how do we form a culture around providing student services within our district. So for me, the why this is so important is I see in other districts the number of out-of-district placements, the number of residential placements, the students who are not able to access school because there's no programming in their current home school, and how difficult it is to access resources otherwise. So for me, BOCES and having these collaborative agreements, helping school boards, districts understand a really easy way to contain special education costs is by offering services and programming closer to home schools. And the research shows that when students are receiving programs and services as close to home as possible, the higher the likelihood of success. So when you can bring an expert in like Jill, who has run collaborative programs, who has set those up in school districts and between school districts as a way of providing excellent services and cost containment, this is a great tool that we can lever. And anytime, I'm always welcome for people to come and see the programs. We have specialized instruction or specialized programs at the elementary level for intensive needs, at the secondary level for intensive needs. We have an alternative day program right within it's not on the campus, but within 5 minutes of our campus. It has significantly controlled special education costs. But I feel like we're in this trap of out of district placements is the only resource, and that is really cost prohibitive. I would hope that people would consider that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question about that then. So in your case, or what you are seeing as the potential statewide, is the BOCES actually delivering the services, setting, running the program, and therefore is limited somewhat in how far you're going to have kids travel to it? Or is the BOCES helping districts create the capacity within the resources they already have to offer the services? Or, I don't know if that's clear, but
it's no, and true, absolutely. It's creating the capacity. So finding two close districts, a student isn't traveling that far. What are the space issues? Who has room? Who has the expertise? And another thing that VTLC is doing an important job in serving us well is helping us find special educators and service providers. Jill can recruit on a much larger way than we can. Bring in applicants, review applications, and has helped us locate special educators and service providers in ways we don't have the capacity to. So it really is growing programs within, finding the right experts and expertise, bringing her resources and training in, as well as identifying those communities that can come together and develop their own programs.
And then those special educators you're finding are district employees?
Go ahead, Jill.
I was going to say they can be. So VTLC can serve as a recruitment force for our districts, and we do that currently. So we may find someone or find a couple of candidates and then be able to present those to districts. So we're taking that process that creates a lot of time and resources for them off their plates. Or we can hire someone, perhaps, District A needs someone 0.4 and District B needs someone 0.6. We're able to potentially hire that person, and we could contract them out to both of those districts, meeting their needs. And I just
lots of flexibility, and really what Jill has done a great job is interviewing superintendents, special ed directors. What are your unmet needs? How can I bridge those needs, look at needs across districts and schools, and fulfill that opportunity?
In the things that we have control over here, I'm sensing that AOE capacity is a big one, that you perhaps feel like you sent your articles of agreement to the office of BOCES, and there's this empty room that it's just sort of sitting in.
Yes.
We have been connected with a couple of members of AOE. They are overwhelmed. They have a lot on their plates as well. But there's a lot of education as well that has to happen at that level for them to understand the capacity of BOCES and what governance structures look like for BOCES.
I mean, there has been a little bit of skepticism, I would say, by the AOE, not undeservedly, for fear of creating another layer of bureaucracy. And that's something that we'll have to manage our way through. But I personally would say that, you know, if we believe BOCES has great potential, then we need capacity at the agency to sort of make it happen. And we knew we were not doing that when we passed the bill last year, but we wanted to at least get the structure in place. And frankly, you folks moving forward with it is now kind of showing us, okay, we got to start taking the next steps.
As well as I think the one piece of the legislation that may have some tweaking. Currently, you're not able to access the $10,000 until you have the the articles of agreement are passed. If there's any way for that to be more in the front of the work, so that, you know, Jill would be great to contract out to other districts and superintendents. She's willing and has the capacity to do that. They don't have a way to fund contracting with Jill to assist in developing articles of agreement. So we have an expert here. She helped us develop our articles of agreement. We now have those drafted. They can be used in other districts. So as an obstacle, if that upfront funding, even a portion of it, so that we could lend out Jill, so that this could be replicated in other places, that would be outstanding.
I think actually we meant that money to be used for creating the articles of agreement. We'll check into that.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the summary, and I didn't go into the legislation, but I'm looking at the summary, and it does say that it is appropriate to the Ed Fund for the grant program for startup costs.
Yeah.
But it sounds a little more interpretation than anything else. So I think that's really important point.
If I may say, I think that this is a really great opportunity to demonstrate how an educational service agency can partner with the Department of Education to launch an initiative, the initiative being BOCES. So because our educational service agency is still in progress, however, we are ahead of the game. I think we're really well poised to be able to help the Agency of Education launch this across the state. And that is what a BOCES does, right? Is we help to support both our departments of education as well as our member districts. So this is really an opportunity for us to do both.
Committee, any other questions? It was really helpful. Thank you. We too, like the agency, find ourselves a bit overwhelmed and often pulled in different directions. So it's nice to be returned to a bill that we passed and something that needs following up on. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, everyone, for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
All right, we'll